All right. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. It is noon my time. I know some of you are all around the world. We have people from France and not sure what other countries, maybe Canada. Maybe you can tell me in the chat. But we have lots of people in the U.S. I did want to start off today by saying that let's keep those in our prayers who are affected by the storm. We have some very close friends, without getting too personal, who have really suffered greatly from the storms that are from Helene, I guess. And so we don't have a lot of news there, but some of you may be going through some tough times too. I don't know how many of you were affected by the storm that went in, and so anyway, let us know if there's anything we can do. Certainly, there are people that are in our prayers, but sometimes we can assist in other ways. Maybe we know someone that can help in that area. We have those storms in our area, unfortunately. And it's been, in times past, we've had to put our working clothes on and go out to the highways and byways and help those less fortunate. So let's keep those in our thoughts and prayers. I see Todd and Angel, you lost power. So I think a lot of people on the East Coast lost power, people that I know personally. So anyway, we've been there as the Torah, as the Torah talks about. You know what it's like because it's happened to you. And here in Louisiana, we have suffered from those storms as well. So, but anyway, we're here today. We're here together. So if you made it, I am very pleased that you made it. By the way, I do also know that we have a person, David Connolly is here from Israel. So we've got people from different places, and Arta is all the way over across the water as well. So, by the way, Albania made a strong stand at the UN the other day. So I told last night, I sent Clody a note and said, I know three Albanians, and I like all three of them. So that's something to say about a country, right? So how are you today? Any thoughts, anything on your mind, anything that you're thinking about in terms of prophet like a nation? What do you think about Seth's, uh, I guess, what do you call that? Illustration, what do you call that, Seth? A transition. Yeah, I had a much simpler way of doing that, and I was telling Seth about it, and I think he said, "Wait a minute, I've got a whole bunch. I got a whole bunch up my sleeve on that." So the way Seth did it, I think, was a lot better in terms of illustrating that late insertion into the text, and it really made a difference. I want to see it, because I couldn't watch it really. I mean, I could kind of see it on the monitor, but I want to see how it played out because I know we put enough into it, hopefully, to convey a message and make a point, and I think it did that. So good to see. Okay, so let's see. Just checking. I'm going to try to monitor the YouTube chat as well as our chat here in the Zoom call. So if you have questions, comments, raise your hand. In other words, let me kick it off one more time. One of the main points in this class, if I did not make myself clear, hopefully I did, is that the term prophet, Navi, is something that is late. It is not only late, it's very late in terms of the biblical writing, and we have to recognize that. Now, what's strange about this, if you ever do a word study, and I know most of you are quite capable, and I know most of you personally are very good students and teachers, so you study these words in the background just like I do. And what you'll know is that even if you look up Navi in some of the best dictionaries, concordances, lexicons, you're going to really come away scratching your head because quite a bit of time you'll find one of the best guesses, I think, is that Navi is tied to the idea of bringing a message. And that very well could be the case. But it's very difficult because, we don't even know for sure the etymology of the word. Some of these are quite simple. You know, when I talk about Jose, even though that's late, we know what it means. Jose is tied to chazon. It's a vision. We know also what roe means. Roe is one who sees. And so quite often we get the picture of people who see the picture. People who get the picture, we see that in the text. Quite often, regardless of what term is used to describe that figure, that person, that office, it's someone who has the veil lifted, or someone who sees things that maybe others don't see. We get that quite a bit. So I've got a lot of text in my mind. There were a lot of things that I thought of including, but I didn't include because I've taught on this so many times in the past, and I have yards and yards or miles and miles of teaching on the subject where I go into every single occurrence and, you know, the historical application, and even talk about who these figures might be. Some of it appears in my book, as you know, and so anyway, there's quite a bit to talk about, and what we'll do is, by the way, I'm going to go for 1 hour today, and so we'll try to get people in and let everybody talk that wants to have a word. Damon, how are you? Shabbat Shalom. I'm going to click the ask to unmute. There we go. How are you?
Shabbat Shalom. I'm doing pretty well.
Good.
With the thought you were just expressing about the idea of the Navi, one thing I wanted to jump in and mention that I'm not sure the class knows about is Deuteronomy 32 verses 8 and 9, this concept of like God's divine counsel, where in the ancient Near East cultural context, you have the Ugaritic pantheon with El at the top, and he's got the 70 gods under him. And what he would do in order to send a messenger is he would have someone there at the table in his presence. He would convey a message to them, and then he would send them to deliver that message to the people. This is the cultural context of the ancient Near East, and this idea here in Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9, when the Most High, El, divided the inheritance to the nations, when he separated the sons of Adam, blah, blah, blah. According to the number, there's an alternate reading in some texts of the sons of God.
Yeah.
The Lord's portion is his people. In other words, the Lord's portion, YHVH, he's the one that was assigned Jacob. That's his inheritance, that's his people, that's his land. So you've got this idea of, okay, you've got 70 sons of El here, and one of them is Jehovah. And he's taking the inheritance. But at the same table, you also have prophets. And
why do you say that they're,
I'm
sorry. Why do you say that there are also prophets at this table? I know the whole thing about the Ugaritic and the divine council, but say that part again. I may have just missed it.
There are also prophets who come to this table. They're specifically coming into God's presence to hear a message and then go and deliver that message.
You mean just for clarity, I don't mean to interrupt again, I'm sorry, but you mean such as we see like in Isaiah 6 or, know, where, okay, I got you. I'm following. Go ahead. Got you.
So whether they're coming into his presence literally or metaphorically in dreams and visions, the idea of a prophet is someone who comes into God's presence to hear a message from God directly. In other words, there's no intermediaries between the prophet and God. Mm-hmm. And then that prophet is going to deliver a message. I just wanted to toss that out there, just so people would know, okay, that's the cultural context and that's where it's coming from.
Okay. No, good idea. Yeah, the divine council, I think that there's quite a bit out there on that if people are interested to do a little bit more study on what Damon brought up. And I'm trying to think, what's the scholar Michael, his last name starts with an H. Do you remember, Damon? What's the guy that I'm thinking of?
Michael Heiser.
Heiser. Yeah, there you go. Thank you very much. Yeah, my mind went blank. I was thinking, what is his last name? I have his books and I've read things that he's written. So that's one. I'm not sure that that's. I mean, there are quite a bit. There's quite a bit out there on the subject. But so one idea to Damon's point is that you do have the prophet being called into this presence, I guess. Isaiah 6 is a good example. We see other texts that have the same thing. So thanks for your comments on that. Nadine, how are you? Let me see if I can get you. I got you unmuted. How are you?
Shabbat shalom. I'm well. How are you?
Good, good. Shabbat shalom.
So maybe a few comments and then maybe a question. But Ross, I've gotten an email from you before that you were not a fan of numbers. And here you are presenting all these numbers. And I was very happy to see that.
I hate, it's funny because I have said that, and I told Jonah the same thing. When he was working on the article, you were actually helping him edit. He told me, he was throwing all this stuff at me, and I said, I hate math. I've been horrible at math my whole life. I don't want to deal with numbers. And so thankfully Seth was able to put that in a chart for me. But yes, you're right. I do hate math. But
no, but look at you using it. I enjoyed that a lot. And I find it very useful. I'm also like a numbers person, a bit like Jono. Like I've thought about, how to add the math up, and that may be something that's like additional. You can make math work in a lot of different ways, but just getting those numbers down. And so the other thing I wanted to say is that as a teacher, Ross, you make your student feel smart, and that's something that I strive to do as also an instructor. But I go to my notes, I'm following along the class. And then, Genesis 27, I have it highlighted. It already said first occurrence of Navi. And then, this is for sure something that I've gotten from one of your previous classes. And I'm thinking, oh, look, I've already gotten highlighted.
That's right. I already knew that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you make us feel smart. And that's, I think, a really great quality. Because I'm like, I'm like encouraged as I'm going through the class.
Well, you should be. Let me just jump in. You should be, because what this group really, really is a different group. I mean, it's like we don't have very many beginners here, and people have been through quite a bit to get where they are. And I think that all of us bring to this table some good insight, that we've found over the years. So no, I appreciate that as a compliment, but I think it is a compliment to the group, really. So that's good. Yeah.
It's very good. I also had a note, I think, I may be pronouncing it wrong, but the Hebrew is ro'eh.
Yeah.
Is this correct?
Yes.
And could you say, because ro'eh could then also be translated differently, is this correct? Or is ro'eh really associated with Navi?
It is associated with the root, we believe it's associated with the root word ra'ah, which means to see. So ra'ah means to see. And so the root idea there is that one will, and by the way, I'm going to upload, I didn't put it up yet because people have a tendency, I should trust people more, but they have a tendency to get bogged down in the details that led to the class that I put together. But I have every occurrence of like ro'eh, and every occurrence of Jose, and people can go through and look at when is a person called this or that. I love this term, though, Nadine, because I was talking to my mom earlier in the week about these different terms and just kind of sharing with her some of what I was looking at. And she said the same. She liked this idea, too. The idea that you are maybe a little bit kind of what Damon suggested, that this person is invited into a divine council. You're allowed to see something maybe at a different level or in a different way than the people around you. So I think that there have always been, according to the biblical text, let's say, always been those who have the eyes to see. I love, by the way, this expression as it appears in the prophets, particularly Jeremiah. Again, it's that time frame. Look, as a scientist, you may help figure this out. I just have a lot of data right now, but it really does really there is an exponential growth of the use of all these terms. Just all of a sudden, it's like just wham, you know. So anyway, but yeah, it does. It's tied to ra'ah, to see. And so it doesn't always mean see in some visionary prophetic sense, but, you know, it means I see this. You know, how many times, I love the way Jeremiah starts. Jeremiah, what do you see? Jeremiah said, well, I see a boiling pot and it's tilted from and he goes, oh, you've seen well. See, so now he's not called a seer, really, in that text, but you get the idea. You go, oh, yeah, I see that. And then right after that, it's like, what do you see, Jeremiah? He said, oh, I see an almond branch, and it's got, oh, you've seen well. I'm going to hasten my word to perform it. So, you know, and even with, and I don't necessarily think the right term is pagan prophet, but if you look at Bilam, he's the one who has the visions of the Almighty. He falls down, he sees, and so anyway, that's the idea, is one who sees.
Yeah, okay, I'll make note of that. Yeah, I think my last comment then, Ross, would be to, you know, kind of connected to the class from 2 weeks ago about this insertion of the law code. And I think you make very compelling arguments. And then it's, of course, now, what do you do with the information that's presented there? Which of course is challenging and uncomfortable. That's okay. I can be uncomfortable. But I think, you know, this word of the prophet and the different variations of this word seems to be a really accurate way of dating the text, especially with the 1 Samuel 9:9.
Yeah.
And I also had that highlighted, and I was like, "Oh, this is where he's going." It made me feel smart.
Well, as long as you don't get bored, like if you listen in, you go, "Oh, I got it figured out. I know where he's going with everything." Hopefully,
No,
I'm joking.
that's a talent instructor. But yeah, I think, and I don't know if others feel the same, but it's also now like, okay, I don't want to delete things from my Bible, but it's also, how to sift through it. It's challenging.
Let me pick up on that, Nadine, and I'm glad you brought it up. Seth gets to hear a lot of this. You know, I really tell him kind of what's on my mind, what's on my heart. I do at times, and he hears it more than others. What I don't want is for people they log in every week and they're learning useful information, okay, but they say, where's this going? I mean, you know, it feels sometimes very uncomfortable, as you described it. Like, where is this leading? Is it ultimately going to be that I'm eliminating things from my blend, eliminating and throwing out? This is late, this is not original. You know, at what point do you know, because some people have written me and said, they feel like, you know, they're going down a path to agnosticism or atheism or something of that nature. Well, that's certainly not where I'm coming from. And so one of the things that the way I would say it is this: I don't know at times where the information is leading. I know that some might feel uncomfortable with that. They're like, wow, you know, you're supposed to be driving this bus. You don't even know where we're going. But really, what I want to do is I want to follow. I want whoever's willing to go with me and to entertain these ideas and to have discussion about it. This is what I really want to do, because like one of the main points of this whole class is the word prophet is very late. So that leaves us with a couple of options. One is, like, in my mind, I've certainly entertained the idea that the entire office of the prophet comes in late too. All right. Now that's not going to be popular with people who want to have a very strong fundamental belief, right? But the other view is, well, maybe originally, let's say a text like Deuteronomy 18 might have said, and I will raise up a seer like you from among my, and it's later updated. Could that be? Could be. But the idea is that the first thing I want to do is for me, it's important to realize and to recognize when a book is written, and others have pointed this out too. Damon talked about the idea of how do we get the context, or I'm not using his exact words, but you get, what are we looking for culturally? What are we looking for in the world at that time? Because I think it tells us a lot. Now, I am thinking in this term. I do connect, and I'm still working on it. I hadn't quite figured it out, but I think Deuteronomy 18, as well as 13, as well as 34, come into the main text of what we now call Deuteronomy in the time of Josiah. This is my belief. And again, I'm telling people when I'm sure about something, this is where I'm leaning. I'll go ahead and tell you. Because we see all the evidence pointing to that same idea. And so what do we do with that? I'm not sure yet, but it's a working hypothesis that the world of the Bible produced the Bible at the hands of one of my favorite people of all time, and it's Jeremiah. And I think he's the one who comes in, he and Baruch, and edit a lot of these things. We're going to see next week when I get into the monarchy, even though I've taught classes on the monarchy, I'm going to approach it from a little bit different angle, I think. So I don't think I really answered that, but that's kind of my idea. Is I think that we just keep pushing forward, and like when I got into the Moses scroll, and I really became convinced very early on, before I knew anything about that manuscript. And I know some people have not read that book, and I'm sorry that you haven't. No, I'm joking. But I really felt like I had built everything that I studied pointed me to an original document that Moses wrote that we no longer have. We have people talking about it. We have writers telling us about it, but it's missing. And I had a list of what would that contain based on the clues in the Bible. And when I found this document, which I call the Moses Scroll, it blew me away because everything pointed to that as being authentic. And now, as you know, there are a lot of people who are saying the same thing. So what do? I tell you, there are texts that I love more than others in the Bible, but every day I carry this whole Bible with me. And, and I might read in Leviticus, I might read in Joshua one day. Last couple of weeks, I've worked through all of the Pentateuch, Joshua, Judges, 1st, 2nd Samuel, 1st, 2nd Kings again. My goal is to read all of those again this week. And, it's just, I'm getting more and more as I work through this, because all of these academic theories, the documentary hypothesis and so forth, all of those theories are produced by people who got the clues, the conclusions from these texts. So that's what we're doing. We're really searching for the original. And I think the way Seth, described when we were talking, it was something like that. Like, we're looking for the original Word of God in what lots of people think is the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Within that, what is that kernel? What's that goal?
I think it's a blessing, Ross, and I'm very excited about this journey.
Well, I'm glad you're with us.
Thank you.
Hey,
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Look, one more thing, Nadine, if you figure out anything on these numbers and why there's such an explosion, shoot me a note, but keep it simple. I don't like hard math. Let's say
I promise. I'll make you feel smart.
Thank you. That's what I was going to ask. All right. Thanks very much. Thanks, Nadine. James Brumgard, how are you, my brother? Let me unmute you.
Good. I think, can you hear me okay? Looks like I'm unmuted.
I got you.
All right, great. A couple of things popped up as you went through the class today. One was, as you brought out in the citation from 1 Samuel 9 about the insertion there about, well, they used to be called seers and now we call them prophets. I immediately thought, is the term prophet used in the Moses scroll? And Dave Tyler did pop in saying he says no.
That's right.
So that helps prove the age of the document, if you will.
Yeah.
Because they don't use that term. Are any of the other terms used in there, seer or otherwise?
No.
I'm just curious.
No.
Not?
No.
Okay.
And so the question, just quickly, I want you to talk, but the question is, we say Moses is a prophet. There's not risen a greater prophet than Moses. So the question is, what is, where does that term first appear? And it certainly isn't the time of Moses. So that's the question. I don't know what that means, by the way. I mean, I kind of do, but I don't want to say it yet. But
Okay.
what do you
And
think?
the other thing that came up, since I know there's others with hands up, is the initial citation there where you talk about in the 1 Samuel 3 about Samuel hearing these voices, and he keeps going to Eli. But
Yeah.
one thing that jumped out of the text at me is that let me find it here. I just have it open. Oh yeah, in verse 3, and I'll just read the second part there. And Samuel lay in the temple of Yahweh, where the ark of God was. What temple are they referring to? Is this in Bethel or what?
Remember, what we tend to get is during the days of the judges, where the tabernacle, if you will, is at Shiloh. So
Shiloh?
yeah, we think that's where that, and in fact, I think the story is set in that area because it begins in Samuel. They go, every year, and in Hannah and so forth, and so yeah, biblical Shiloh. By the way, that's a fun place to visit. Maybe, God willing, we'll all go together one day. Some of you can go with me, and we'll do some touring there.
Okay, I was just curious that they use the term temple, where to me tabernacle indicates they're still using tents and that type of
By the
stuff.
way, no, that's an excellent point, James. It's another way to date a text. We do get terms also like associated with the holy place, whether it's called a Mishkan, a Mikdash, a Beit. We get some of that mixing going on as well. And one of the things that I want people to recognize is that the vocabulary is a very good indicator of the last hand to touch a document, right? So that could be, probably is a sign of a later editor, which is updating that text. So because you see this throughout the biblical narratives, you do see the introduction of what we call anachronism, and the way we've described it in other classes. Very clearly, you're reading a story that's supposed to be set in a certain time, and you hit a word that's from a later time. You go, wait a minute, what is that? In the case that we talked about today, it's one of the best in the Bible because it really, and the way that Seth demonstrated that through the little video interruption, if I could do this for quite a bit, and Seth's already thinking, how could because he said, if I have to do this where it's going to be several, times, I'm going to have to try a different method. But, because a lot goes into making just a single interruption. So anyway, but what we see, though, is some of the examples. If you're reading through Shakespeare and you hit a word like groovy or something of that nature, where it throws you into a time of the hippies or something, you'd be like, well, that doesn't sound like, did they use that word in the time of Shakespeare? And that's what we see in the text. We often see anachronistic language. It just gives it away. Doesn't mean that it's not true. Doesn't even mean in and of itself that later editorial piece is not inspired. It doesn't mean that necessarily. It could be just an updating the text. The fundamentalist among us would say, yes, that's right, Ross, exactly, that's right. But, whether it is or not is up for debate and discussion. That help at all, James? Did I let you finish? All right. Hopefully. Thanks for your comments, James. Eric, I'm going to unmute you. How are you, brother?
Hey, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I just wanted to highlight Matthew 24:24. the appearance of, or the occurrence of signs importance as it relates to a false prophet, which seems to parallel Deuteronomy 13:1 and 2, Otot and Umoftim.
Yep.
And also just kind of like this theme of Otot and Umoftim as a pejorative, like needing them. We see that in the New Testament with, again, in Mark 13:22 to Matthew 24:24, and in John 4:8, where it says the Samaya Kai Tarata or whatever, signs importance.
Yeah.
It's like in regards to needing them to believe in something.
Right.
And it's kind of cautionary in that regard.
Exactly. Yep. Good
That's all.
stuff.
But also Judges, it's interesting how it moves north geographically as you move through the narrative. The first judge that is that needs a sign or important for their commission, I think it's like in Ephraim.
Say that again, that last part again. I'm sorry, I lost you just for a second.
Yeah, the first judge, if I'm not mistaken, needed a sign or important.
Oh yeah,
was in Ephraim.
Yeah.
But also kind of like northern Israel, you know. And in Matthew 11, he says, if I perform these miracles, that's dunamis, that's different though, you know, or whatever. In Tyre, they would believe, right? You know, because they were superstitious people. Like that was the trope, you know.
Yeah.
And kind of like needing signs of importance as it relates to the false prophet or whatever it is, you know, a magician.
Well, let me jump in. One thing that I'd
Please.
like to highlight that you just brought up, which is really, really good and insightful, which I often think that the things that you say and write are insightful, but this particularly, this idea that the northern, some of these textual editorial sections have the scent of the north. So like I used to not think about this. One of the first things that becomes obvious to students and teachers of the Bible, if you really look at it, you're going to see very clearly the distinction between northern Israel and southern Israel. The scribal schools in the north, scribal schools in Judah. You'll see quite a bit. And in fact, most of us who really study the text will come away with the idea that whether you believe in the documentary hypothesis or some other foundational, how do we get the text of the Bible, you see a mixing of stories from the north and the south. Well, the people in the north, it just so happens, they are often the ones who have these, how do you say, unbelievable, almost unbelievable stories, signs and wonders and things like that. So what you just brought up is something that I've been working on for a project that it's still on our table. We just haven't gotten to it yet. But when you look at the north, you get the stories of Elijah and Elisha. I mean, these guys, the miracles that they perform, those stories don't happen in the south. They just don't. And the stories in the Gospels are playing off of that same thing. So if I think signs and wonders and miracles and magic, I'm not going to put it in Judah. I'm going to put it in the north. And I challenge people to go through some of these stories in the Bible and you go, where did that come from? See, here's one of the things that I look for when I study the Bible is not only do we have anachronism, not only do we have the story that we saw today in 1 Samuel 9:9 acted out on the screen in front of us, where a person speaks from another time. That's one intrusion into the text. But, I also see where someone is speaking from a different place. And we get that through understanding the culture and customs and this mystical, magical tour is something that shows up quite a bit. So You do. You see it in the Gospels, and there's a reason why a lot of the healing and so forth takes place in the North, whether you're talking about the Hebrew Bible or in the New Testament. Think about, do you ever see in the South food multiplied? You certainly see it in the Hebrew Bible. Now, I see a lot of people who make fun of the Gospels. Usually these are anti-missionary folks, people who say, well, the story is really dumb, and let me show you why, and they bash the New Testament. But they're coming at it trying to ignore the fact that the Hebrew Bible has it too. But it's not a problem with the New Testament text. What truly is going on there is these are stories from the North, right? So that's just a little bit. But thanks for your comments. I appreciate it, Eric. That's some good stuff. All right. Let me get my friend Miriam. Miriam, how are you? I'm going to ask to unmute. Let's see if I can do it. Can you unmute? There you are.
Shabbat Shalom, can you hear me?
I hear you perfectly well. How are you, my friend?
I am so blessed with the study today, and I thank you for it. And I'm kind of perplexed with some questions. I have 3 of them.
Are they easy or hard?
I hope so. It's about what you just taught. So,
All right, let's see if I can help.
My first, not a question, but is the word you brought up later on, Navi.
Okay.
Okay, that kind of threw me for a loop, and I will ponder on that, but not now.
Yeah.
Okay, but number 1 is there a difference in just a prophet versus one like Moshe?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, and if you think about it, what does it mean to be like Moses? This is the question. So now I'm going to take off the academic hat where we're looking at all the math and everything I looked at today. If I look at the text just as I received it, and Deuteronomy represents the story from the time of Moses and the way it's written. In other words, Deuteronomy 18 is written as if this is a message from God to Moses. Moses conveys it to the people that God is going to raise up a prophet like him from the midst of the people. All right, so we're on the same page, right? Well, if that's the case, my question now shifts. What is a prophet like Moses? Well, if I use this approach, then I go to Numbers chapter 11, and in Numbers chapter 11 and into 12, Numbers 12 specifically tells me that a Moses prophet, a Moses-like prophet, is not going to be like these other prophets who get dreams and visions, but one who maybe speaks to God pay, mouth to mouth. Some translations say face to face, but it's literally mouth to mouth. And he envisions God, right? So whoever, this is the idea. This is the way most people look at this. So many of these people would say, well, a prophet like Moses is not just any old prophet. This is a prophet that is to be like Moses. So for instance, in Micah, there's a passage that talks about, I will show him marvelous things. And there are other prophecies which some would say this is talking about the prophet like Moses. So if I were making a checklist with you, Miriam, and we said, let's make a list, what is a prophet like Moses? Well, is he going to be delivering the people out of other countries? Because we have a lot of text in the prophets which talk about, I will save them from the north and the south. And is that going to be our prophet? So I would model it off of the Moses story, if that makes sense. Does that help at all?
Yes. Number 2 question, and I'm trying to go quickly. I want to hold up. Are narrators versus seers the same, or are they different?
Well, in the text in 1 Samuel 9, we do get, the text is presented, and then we have the interruption. And we don't know, I mean, we can have, I have guesses, but we don't know who wrote that insertion in verse 9. But we don't know if that is a seer or if it's just a scribe, if it's someone who is writing a record of the history and just wants to add a note to make sure that the readers know what's coming. So I love this text because in 1 Samuel 9:9, you're in the middle of a story. You're reading about the boy Saul, not boy, but Saul and his helper are looking for daddy's donkeys, and all of a sudden, this narrator, we don't know who he is, though, Miriam. We don't know if he's a seer, but what we do know is that the narrator says, in times past, what was called a prophet today was called a seer. So the writer is telling us, get ready because I'm going to use a term called seer. And you might not know that because this text was written later. But he's using ancient documents, supposedly, where the text is seer, and so he's really just trying to get you and me ready for what's coming, and that's exactly what he does. Now, I don't know, if you ask me personally, Miriam, I don't know if he's a prophet, but I do really am leaning. This is just a theory. I'm testing it. So it's a scientific test. It's an approach to the Bible where I have certain hypotheses and I'm investigating them. Right now, I want to think that a prophet, Jeremiah, and his helper, Baruch, his scribe, I think they are writing these stories. Now, that doesn't mean they're making them up. They could have very ancient text, and he would have access to them because he's a priest, but they have these ancient texts, and they're updating them and putting them together because, Jerusalem has been destroyed, basically. They're trying to preserve them. How about that? Does that get you a little way? Got you.
Great. Last question. Prophets, seers, narrators can be all equal. One and the same.
They seemingly can be interchangeable if we look at the terms. Like, in other words, a narrator does not have to be a prophet. There's nothing that says only prophets can write text. But we can say that the Bible does interchange those four terms for the man. They got man of God. We have man of God. We have seer. We have visionary, and we have prophet. And those four terms, not only are they interchanged, sometimes what we would call a prophet might be called a seer. Sometimes what we call a seer might also be known as a visionary. And we see sometimes those texts, like I've got examples in all the data I can upload later, but I've got data that says sometimes Gad, remember it says David's prophet Gad is the seer. So he's a prophet, he's a seer, and we get all those different ideas that are mingled together. So it is interchangeable. Now, what we don't know, the narrator could just be a scribe who's copying text, and he might be a guy just like me who doesn't have any prophetic gift, or I don't claim to be I'm going to use a line from Amos. I'm not the prophet nor the son of a prophet, right? That's what Amos said. I'm just a guy. But we get the idea that it could be, because we do know that sometimes prophets did write. So that's kind of left open. But just to your question, those terms are used interchangeably, and they give us some clue as to when they were written, by the way.
Great. I just want to say one more thing. Thanks to our Baruch John Perry.
Yes, indeed.
Amen.
Amen. That's right.
Shalom to all.
Hey, thank you, Miriam. It's always good to hear your voice. Have a beautiful weekend. Shabbat shalom. Okay. And I see Karen. Let me unmute Karen. How you doing, Karen? Good to see you. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Can you hear me this morning?
I can hear you. Are you talking to your hair?
Yeah. I put headphones in because my microphone's not working right.
Oh, I thought that was some kind of fancy, like a piece of your ponytail. You could pull it over and talk in it. Nice.
Sure. Okay.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. So, I think a lot of us growing up in different places have our own idea of how we see a prophet in our mind. Is it someone who tells the future? Is it someone who says something to us that we didn't know before? What exactly does a prophet do in your culture?
Right.
And what is it? And, I see Moses as different than a lot of the other prophets that are mentioned in the text.
Yep.
He's not, I'm thinking of 1 Samuel 10, when
Oh, yeah.
Saul, he gets anointed king, and then he goes and joins a band of prophets and
Yeah.
prophesies among them. I mean, I read that completely different.
That's a good
Than
point.
what it's written here. I see it like Saul came a bunch of dudes eating mushrooms, and they said, "Eat this thing, and you're going to see God."
Yeah.
And because if I go to an ashram and drink the tea, I'm going to see what they're seeing, and I'm going to, I see that as, stuff like this kind of going on here. And I mentioned in the YouTube the idea of the doctrine of transference, that was big in the early 90s when I was in the Pentecostal church. And it was this idea that you had to go to this place and get whatever spirit was there and bring it back to your church.
Yeah.
And thankfully, my dad was invited. They offered to pay his way, and he was going to go. And then he was like, "Oh, this doesn't feel right." And to me, in that situation, and group psychosis is huge, is a real thing. And a lot of stuff that people feel is you're feeling your own emotions.
Yeah.
And, and if somebody says, I felt the rushing wind, there was a, "Oh yeah, we felt it too. Did you know?" So, I mean, there's a lot to sift through here when it comes to prophets, the Spirit of God. What exactly is going on here? Is it some kind of, are they really seeing, having a supernatural experience, or are they under the influence, or are they, experiencing their own emotions? Is it some kind of suggested psychosis?
Yeah.
I've been in services where, the evangelist says they see an angel. Well, then after everybody leaves, the story is everybody saw an angel there, when they didn't. So I think that, when we're looking at all these prophets or people that are referred to prophets or whatever, we have to look at them, I don't know, differently. I see Jeremiah as, warning people, but he's having dreams, isn't he?
Well, it seems to be both. He's seeing visions. At least according to the text, you get, and that's the point. I get what you're saying. You get these different ways, different manners in which God communicates to this person to ultimately share the message.
Right.
I've never been one that says, "Well, that never happened." Just because it hasn't happened to me, right?
Right.
So, I am never going to question what another claims. If somebody says, "Look, the Lord told me in a dream," you know what? Because I'm going to listen. I'm going to be very respectful, and I'm going to treat it as if, we get this saying in the Bible sometimes where a certain person said, and they considered the matter,
Right.
So if someone says, "The Lord told me such and such," then I'm going to say, "Well, thanks for passing that along." And I'm not saying it like I don't believe it. I'm going to think, okay, because I have not personally seen things, but I've had people, there are things that I cannot explain in my life, where someone had insight into my life. Now, how did they get that insight? And they would claim that they got it from God. And there's sometimes in my life I have experienced through what someone else saw, something that I've thought, man, there's no way they could have known that, So So what I don't want to do is dismiss and say, well, but to your point, what I look at is what we should always, first of all, be very, let's look at this, I'm not just going to jump up and say, yeah, that's true and this and that, but I'm certainly going to consider it. But in the biblical text, we do see the same kind of things. In fact, there are texts. I used to say when I was teaching about the prophets, not a thing that they said ever went through that fell to the ground and didn't get fulfilled. But there are texts in the Hebrew Bible that have not come to pass. And some would say, well, you just got to be patient. Now, I'm talking some are 2,500 years old, and they still haven't come to pass. So maybe they will, but, I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no on some of those. But again, I do think that whenever I look at the text and I see all of these different ideas that are bouncing around, they don't quite align with what people today call a prophet.
Right.
I've used this expression, and I'll be quiet, but there is a guy in the town next to where I'm sitting, and on his sign, he's got the name of his church, and then he calls himself a prophet.
Yeah.
Well, every time I see him at the post office, I always greet him as prophet.
Right.
Because, that's what he wants to go by. So I say, hey, prophet, how's it going? And he doesn't like me, but I don't think it's because God told him not to like me. I think he doesn't like me because he knows that I don't really think that he's a prophet. And now who am I to say I don't think this guy's a prophet? I have reasons. But anyway.
Yeah. No, lost my train of thought there for a second. Yeah, we definitely have a different view, and people giving themselves titles. But yeah, I just see as, the prophet, maybe he knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And warns you, always, like Moses and Jeremiah return to Torah. You always got to have to look for that in there. But, and with Moses, he knows that there's disaster coming. And I think God really does tell him how to get the people out.
Yeah.
So there's that kind of, you could call that prophet if you want, or just man of God. I think that fits better.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that phrase.
What I was going to say is, I have a friend and other people that have had, they believe they saw like a flying saucer, alien stuff. And I believe them. I believe they saw what they saw. But, and a lot of times I don't know what it was, but a group of people see something, and I believe those people, they see something, and I'm not going to argue with them or say, well, I haven't seen it, so I don't believe it.
Yeah.
I give them, everyone has their own experience. It doesn't really do any good to try and argue with someone about the experience that they've had or their own feelings. Just, smile and nod. Okay, that's interesting. Consider it. And that, that's what I do with a lot of people in other religions. And, when they're having these, I don't know if you would call them supernatural, out of the ordinary experiences.
Yeah.
But I still take a lot of it with a grain of salt. That doesn't necessarily mean it's for me.
Right.
But,
yeah, and I would just add that, like I said, you and I are saying the same thing on this. Like, it's not my place to say that someone else didn't have a certain experience or a certain communication from God just because I didn't. I feel like when I read the text, I don't really say the Lord gave me this message, but I do pray for insight, though. I do pray for insight, and I hope, and I want to think that there are times where I'm given insight because I've prayed for it and I've applied myself to the text, but I never have, like, I don't wake up with a voice that says, you know, Ross, show the people the distinct intrusion in 1 Samuel 9, verse 9. That's not the way it works for me. What works for me is, you know, I probably spent 50 hours this week making charts and looking at every occurrence, and, you know, but again, that's not to say that you don't get insight that way. But you know, I did go years ago. I don't know if you're from sort of a charismatic background. I was through that phase at one point, and I wanted to go see a guy by the name of R.W. Shambach.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he evidently was raising the dead and casting out demons, and he was doing it everywhere but where you were. But he did, supposedly, and I went. And a friend of mine and I, we rode together. We were the first ones that arrived at the place. And our prayer there, we were sincere. We were young guys in our 20s and going to see R.W. Shambach. And I remembered, God, just show us what you want us to see. And I tell you what I saw. I think this was an answered prayer. I got on the front row of that auditorium. When I tell you we were the first ones in line, there was nobody in front of us. And the first thing I saw was a big sign, and it said R.W. Shambach. And it was like in neon letters, and there was all this about what R.W. Shambach is doing, and R.W. Shambach is doing this, and R.W. Shambach. And I was there to hear about the name of Jesus, right? But I wasn't hearing anything about Jesus. It was all about Shambach. And when he walked out, and I saw his suit, and I remember I saw his jewelry, and I saw, and I saw, and I saw, and I couldn't get out of there quick enough. I mean, I stayed for the whole thing. But I do think, unfortunately, there are people who are not, you know, I'm not going to question a person's motives necessarily, but there are things that don't feel right with some who claim to have this authority. And we get that in the biblical text as well. We get people, you know, God would say, this person's saying that I sent them. I didn't send them, you know. So maybe if it happened in biblical times, it might happen in modern times as well. So we just have to be careful. And you go, well, how will I know which word is from God and which one isn't? Well, if you read Deuteronomy 13 and 18 side by side, you might have more questions than you have answers. I'll just say that, you know. I'm encouraging people to do that, by the way.
Right. They're selling a formula. You do this, you're going to have everything you ever wanted.
That's right. Yes, indeed. But just one more thought. I think there could very well be people who have wonderful insight. In fact, I know some that I would tend to trust more than others, and I would not mention who those people are. But several times things have happened, and they've told me, and I think, well, you know, and they're not doing it for the publicity. They're not doing it on a stage anywhere. So there could very well be people who have that intuition, that insight that's from God. So it's not, I don't want people to just
really
throw
observant.
it out. Could be. Hey, good stuff. Anything else, Karen?
Have you ever tried Jewish coffee?
I thought you were going to ask me if I ever tried mushrooms.
No.
Jewish coffee,
Say no.
yes.
You're supposed to say no.
Yeah,
Okay.
No, I have not. I have not tried mushrooms. I have tried Jewish coffee, and
I'm telling a joke, Ross. You need to say no.
Okay, I've never tried Jewish coffee.
It's really good. I think you'd like it.
He brews it?
No, I said it is really good. I think you'd like it.
I gave you a joke too. He brews it. It was a question like he brews.
Okay.
Yours was better though.
Okay. All right. Talk to you later.
All right. Send me some of that coffee. All right, Betty. I'm going to unmute you. How are you, my friend? Shabbat Shalom. You should be able to unmute. Let me try that.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
Shabbat Shalom on this beautiful day in Southwest Louisiana. It's gorgeous here.
Yes, indeed.
Anyway, yeah, I was trying to unmute myself while you were trying to unmute me, and so
we were working against each other. But how are you today?
Hurt. We need to work together, Ross.
That's right.
I'm doing well, thank you. I have three things, short. One is, I'm not sure, I missed the beginning of the broadcast, but, you know, many of our people were in the brunt of Storm Helene. And I know that they're in all of your prayers. I know Ralph and Becky were some, but just a reminder for those of you who do not know,
now we're working together. I did bring that up, but go ahead. Yes.
Okay,
absolutely.
I'm glad you did. Yeah. It's not beautiful and sunny everywhere.
That's right.
So there are those of us who are hurting, and when some of us are hurting, all of us are hurting because we have a love for each other. And here I go. I'm already crying and I haven't even started.
Yeah.
Okay. The first thing has to do with actually it's the Jewish New Year. And this is a little off subject, but not totally, is that this is the last Sabbath of 5784, according to the Jewish calendar. And so being the last Sabbath, I thought it was interesting that the Torah portion was a double one, but the first one was Nitzavim, which means to stand. Not only to stand, but to stand firm. And just a brief little story on that. One of my bosses in years past was Uri ben Ari, who was an Israeli. And when he found out that the Torah portion, when Roger and I converted, was Mitzvahim, he goes, and he stood up, all 6'6" of him, stood up tall, and he said, Betty, that means to stand and stand firm. And that's what you're doing, and that's what you need to continue to do. So that was 30 years ago. And I pray to Hashem that I am still standing. I try in the midst of everything. And I think all of us here are, no matter what comes. I mean, we find things that may bowl us over and you go, oh, wait a minute, what am I going to do with this? And then you get up and you research and you learn and you pray and you go on.
Right.
And you're still standing. And I just think that's really, really important.
I do too. Yep.
And then the half Torah portion, which goes with that, I think is very interesting. And it's for us today from Isaiah 61:10. It says, I will rejoice intensely with Hashem. My soul will exult with my God. And you know Hebrew much better than I. But the root word of rejoice in the first section is, I understand, is sasun, which means to, it's an outward joy. And so whenever we speak, whenever we need to have an outward joy and not a negative, downcast face. You know, we just need to we need to spread that joy outwardly. And the second word, exalt, the root word I understand is gila, which is an inner joy. Like it's something that is always present with us in our soul because we have the divine presence within us. And so as we go forth into this new year, whether you look upon it as a new year or not, every day, you know, the Feast of Trumpets is coming, and we are to both rejoice and exalt our God. And I just thought that was really important.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, it's interesting that some of the high holy days actually, and to go along with your points, it's commanded to rejoice.
Yes.
You know? And so that's That's the deal. How do you command somebody to rejoice, especially people who are in dire straits and bad things are going on? But
Right. Well, I guess that's the knowing that no matter what we go through, that our God is always with us and always present in everything.
absolutely.
And
Good
I know
stuff.
some are going through really hard times, through deaths in the family, through floods and hurricanes and lost loved ones. And it's just really hard.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Listen, you better go take care of Braca. She is.
Oh, you hear her.
Oh, yeah. She's trying to get
Yes.
Mama's attention.
She is trying to get my attention.
She wants you to take her out on a walk in this beautiful weather. That's what
I
she
know.
wants.
Well, when this is over, that's on my agenda. So
Well, tell her, not
okay.
me. All right.
Okay.
Have
All
a
right.
have a
Shabbat
beautiful
shalom.
week, Betty. All right.
Thank you. And thank you everything for everything.
All right. You're
All
welcome.
right. Take care.
All right. Hey, Clody. How are you? Well, I can hear you. There you are. Shabbat
Hi.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom. I had a question.
Okay.
So if man of God and if seer and if visionary and if prophet is the same word almost, does all these four terms relate in any way with Messiah? I can't hear you.
Somehow I muted myself. You wasn't on your end. I must have bumped it with my chin or something. So the question is, your question is the person, is the Messiah related to any of these terms?
I mean, is a Messiah supposed to be also a prophet or a man of God also?
So
I know that Messiah is an anointed one, but
right.
Is he also a kind of prophet?
Well, at times we do get overlap with those phrases too. So, for instance, we have to look at, if we did a chart and we said, let me look at every king who is an anointed one, particularly where we get the idea that David's sons are messiahs. But if we look at all the kings, if we go, is there any of these, are they ever called a man of God? Are they ever called a prophet? Are they ever called a visionary? Are they ever called a Navi? And the answer to that is going to help shape our understanding of your question. The answer, as far as just off the top of my head, I don't remember where an anointed one who is a monarch has any of these terms. But we do get, for instance, someone who is anointed. And, if you look at who all does Samuel anoint, are any of those people, this is going to lead into something I've got coming later, are any of those people referred to as an anointed one and a man of God or something of that nature? So we do see sometimes where one of these people could be, for a biblical definition, an anointed one, a Messiah. But not the idea that we have a figure who is the Messiah, descendant of David, and this criteria that we've developed. Yeah, I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I was not asking about the eschatology, and I was not asking about what happens in the what will happen in the end times.
I gotcha.
My question was just for the scriptures that we have.
That's right. No, that's a good question. And there's a little bit of overlap, but it's certainly not what one would expect. Especially and I'm glad you qualified. You're not talking about the eschatology side of things, but especially as it later developed, people sort of pull these ideas out of the air, and they're not really based on the scripture. So now,
Yeah, I always wanted to note, sorry,
yeah,
a comment that Marianne did during the class. She was saying that we have also the term watcher, the watcher. So that is another mixed term, or another term that is used about some kind of angels, with what I know. But
yeah,
then again, it's like every woke wave, or every wave of people that are seeking God, they all have with them other terms or reinforced terms.
absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I was looking for something that I just read, if I can. And it uses the idea of a watcher. And this was not part of the class today, but just for those who are interested, in the book of Isaiah, I'm looking for the exact, it's Isaiah 21:8. This is a classic text that gives us a reason to do what we're doing. Like, when sometimes people ask me, why are you looking at this, the Bible, this way, where you're doing historical critical work on the Bible? A lot of people would tell me, and I get emails sometimes, and they say, just leave the Bible alone. Let us enjoy our simple understanding, right? That I really don't get many of those. But anyway, so Isaiah 21:8. Then a lion cried out. Now, your translations are going to be all over the place. On a watchtower, my Lord, I stand. Now, and in the Hebrew text there, this also brings up several questions. So people look at this and they go, wait a minute, what is this really saying? Is a lion crying out? Does a lion cry out? So people, different translations, because by the way, the Hebrew Bible says a lion cries out. Now, believe me, I know some people would say, yes, Ross, that's the Lion of the tribe of Judah crying out. Or they'd come up with some interpretive answer for that. But the question about this watcher, this person who is a watching one, a lion is literally in the text. Now, I know this is not exactly what you asked, Clody, but just bear with me, because it kind of, your question made me think. So some translation says they change the wording, the translation, to say, he cries out, I see a lion. Well, what is the text really talking about? We have to work our way through. Now, I'm just going to hit a couple of more high points. In some, the word for lion in Hebrew is aryeh, and some people change the text, instead of a lion, to the name of the watcher, as someone named Aryeh who cries out. It's not a lion, it's a guy named Lion, right? So then you say, well, is this a watcher named Lion? Now, here's why it's important to look at the Greek, the Hebrew, the Masoretic text, the Dead Sea Scrolls, because in the Isaiah scroll, it doesn't say lion, it says the ro'eh. Remember, when one of our words for the seer is based on the seer is ra'ah, here in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's spelled slightly different. Instead of the lion, it says the seer cries out. That makes sense. So now we've got another one for the tally in the book of Isaiah, and this person is called the watcher. So when you bring up the term watcher, by the way, that is often, the translation is, if you go back to the Hebrew, it's going to be tied to this idea of the seer, the watcher. But again, that's another great point, Clody. It's where do we get that? By the way, the story I was reading is the way this book kicks off. Some of you have bought this book. I'll post the link, but in fact, it's in the link of the video you watched today, my class. It's called The Text of the Old Testament, An Introduction to Biblia Hebraica. It's one of the classic cases of a textual corruption. Once the lion made it into the text, it was there. It made it into the Greek Septuagint. Everybody talked about a lion. Imagine a lion saying, "I'm standing on the watchtower." And you're like, wow, that lion just said something. But it's a textual corruption because the Dead Sea Scrolls, when they were found, Isaiah 21:8 doesn't say lion. It says a watcher, person who sees. Just a slight misspelling in the Hebrew, and everybody's looking for a lion that doesn't exist. I don't know. That might have helped. That might have made it worse. Good stuff. What else, Clody?
It made it worse.
Wonderful, wonderful day. I tell you, I hope everyone has a great day. I'm going to throw one more thing into the mix before I go, and this is for some of my Christian friends. I know we have Christians who listen in, and this is going to be a homework assignment, just for fun, But it's an interesting text, and I'm going to read one text from the Christian writings. And now this is Eric. I expect Eric to jump all over this. Eric, are you listening? Yeah, I hope you're still with me because I'm expecting you to really jump into this. So I'm going to go to Matthew 13 and verse 34. All right, here we go. This is fun. This is an exercise. Jesus told the crowds all these things in parables. Without a parable, he told them nothing. This was to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet. All right, you ready? By the way, some translations say the prophet Isaiah, but those are wrong. It just says prophet, all right? Here's what was spoken through the prophet. I will open my mouth to speak in parables. I will proclaim what has been hidden from the foundation of the world. Who is this prophet that Jesus is quoting? And what word is used? I'm wrapping it up, folks. I got to go, so I want you to write this down. Who is the prophet that Jesus refers to in Matthew 13, verse 34? What is he called? Which of the terms? And what verse is he quoting? So who is the prophet? And then follow that through. Find out and maybe email me or post it in the comments of the video or however you can get in touch with me. And if you get this right, you're a winner. If you get it wrong, you're a winner. Everybody's a winner. But if you get it right, you're really a winner. So tell me who it is, where they're quoting from, and what do you think about this? By the way, again, is this prophet a prophet? Is this prophet a seer? Is this person a visionary, a man of God? It's worth looking into because I think Yeshua, Jesus, is onto something here. Have a beautiful week. By the way, if you're in the Yachad and you're doing the Hebrew study with us, we're doing Hebrew on Monday night. So Monday night is a night that we're going to do Hebrew. And get this coming week, Jono Vandor and I, thanks to Seth's work, are going to kick off a new series. We're going to record at least. I don't know how soon it's going to come out, but when I tell you there's nothing like this on the internet, I don't know of anything like this on the internet in our world of Bible study. This is fun. It's exciting. And hey, you get the inside scoop. It's coming soon. So Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. I love you guys. Thanks for joining. And remember, keep those in the path of the storm in your prayers as they deal with the aftermath. There are people that are going to be without homes. There are people who are going to be without electricity, and they can't even use their phones. They're going to be without service. And so think about that, and let's keep them in our prayers. Have a beautiful week. See you next time.